from newstalkzb.co.nz.
It's Mike Hosking.
The election breakfast, our guest is John Key. Sandra has a question.
Are you comfortable with how long it's taking to rebuild Christchurch?
I think the honest answer is we'd love that to happen more quickly, Sandra. But the issue there is that, firstly, one, you've still got seismic activity happening in Christchurch, so the land's still moving. And while that happens, that presents some issues. Secondly, I think it's worth putting a bit of scale around Christchurch. So it is the fourth largest insurance claim in the world since 1970. So the only three bigger claims were the 94 Californian earthquake, the 95 Kobe earthquake, and the recent earthquake and tsunami in Japan. The third thing is it's really complex because you're basically pulling down 1,400 of the 1,800 buildings in the CBD alone. There are already 6,500, 7,000 homes on the red zone, and that you're having to work through a program of all of those things. So if you think about the moving parts, 405,000 claims to EQC, insurance issues that you need to work through, the council, land determination, and still seismic activity. So I think that things are going a bit slower than people would want, but there's a lot of confidence in Christchurch that will be rebuilt. It will be our second largest city, and it'll be a place of high growth, both population and economic growth in the years ahead.
Smith City is back open. Question from the floor.
Prime Minister Gilbert Peterson, EMA, why do we have an emissions trading scheme when no other country in the world has anything like it, particularly in agriculture?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say is other countries do have an emissions trading scheme. Europe has that, and Australia's just passed their legislation to have something in that regard. And most countries are doing something. From an agricultural point of view, we agree with you. So what's the point of an emissions trading scheme is to change the profile of your emissions. So what we do is there's a small charge, as you're aware, on electricity, on fuel, and on some very large emitters, and that money's used to plant trees. So it recycles itself, if you like, and lower our overall profile. We've said, look, unlike Labor, we're not going to bring agriculture in 2013, and we won't bring them in 2015.
Do you think you'll ever bring it in?
Well, I think the answer for agriculture is less around the emissions trading scheme and more around science.
Yeah.
And that's why
there's no scientific answer at the moment, though, is there?
No, but we, funnily enough, led the world in setting up a thing called the Global Greenhouse Gas Alliance. 34, 35 countries have joined us because everybody's in the same position, which is the world is getting larger and more populated. It wants to buy more and eat more food, and we've got to do that in a way which is environmentally friendly.
I think the thrust of the question from the floor, though, and it was a good one, is that when you say Australia and Scandinavia have a scheme, China don't, India don't, America don't. They're the polluters, they're the people. Even if you agree we're wrecking the world, even if we all agreed with that, America's not interested, China's not interested, India's not interested. Until they are, why the hell are we?
Yeah, so the problem and where the flaw of that argument is if you go and look at what they're doing on the ground in those countries now, there is substantial change taking place. So go and have a look at a place like China. I've had their climate change minister in my office, and you should see the things that they're doing. So there is enormous change happening. That's also true in the United States, a lot of change happening. So look, my view has been that this is an issue which is a long-term problem. If we go slow and steady, our economy can adjust. And if you ramp the thing up and then, sort of a knee-jerk reaction, I don't think it'll work.
Why are we leading the way? I think that's what most people can't understand. I mean, no matter what China and America and India are doing, they're not committing to targets, they're talking the talk, they're not actually doing that much, they're not committing themselves, and yet we at the bottom of the world in this fragile state we're in are going, woohoo, look at us leading the way. What's the point of that?
That was the previous Prime Minister?
No, you've agreed, it's not as much as Labor, but you've agreed to an ETS.
Oh, yeah, but it's a vastly different ETS. So
still an ETS. I'm still paying tax on my petrol. Yeah, okay. Because China's polluting the world and we want to save the planet. It makes no sense. It lacks logic.
Yeah, but that's like saying I got a speeding ticket for going 61 k's in a 60k area vis-a-vis I got a speeding ticket for doing 140 k's in a 60k area. I mean, yes, we've got an ETS, but it doesn't abate at 8%. It doesn't have everything coming in. It doesn't have an uncapped price of carbon. Ours is a very controlled, small charge on fuel and on electricity.
Would you change your mind if Abbott gets in and rolls it out of Australia?
Well, Abbott's also said he's going to go and get $1 billion from taxpayers and spend it in other areas. So
But if he rolls it, would you re-look at it?
Well, I don't think that's terribly likely. I think New Zealand is much better to take a slow, steady approach as it is.
Some quick fire for the Prime Minister. Last thing you were in trouble with your wife for?
Well, to be perfectly honest, it was her birthday last Monday, and I said I'd be home at 9. I got home at 11:30.
And what happened?
She was asleep.
The last thing you saw at the movies?
King's Speech.
Skincare routine?
A little bit of moisturiser occasionally.
Did you moisturise this morning?
No, but I washed, you at least know.
First job.
I always do that.
First job.
I hate to admit it, but check the BlackBerry in the morning.
Your first job? No. Your first job ever.
I thought you were going to ask.
Although it's gripping to know you check your
brush my
BlackBerry.
teeth. And no, first job was well, I guess first serious job was I worked for McCulloch Menzies as an auditor. Little known fact, but I too have suffered from green tick disease like many auditors.
What would be your
useless?
What would be your specialist topic in Mastermind?
And Mastermind, it would be great talk show hosts I've been interviewed by.
When did you last do the supermarket shopping?
Oh, a couple of weeks ago. It's awesome. It's a great place to go. I come home with Max with all the stuff that Brona doesn't want, and I campaign for like an hour and a half. It's fantastic.
What are the two things that your school teachers would have said about you?
Unlikely Prime Minister. No, I'm sure they would have said. They would have said never shuts up and reasonably hardworking.
The trait you admire most in your friends?
Loyalty.
The trait you dislike most in people?
Arrogance.
The Prime Minister is with us. More of your questions after 8 o'clock. The news in a couple of moments on this election breakfast special.